Good morning, everyone. I have never used a microphone before. I was expecting a little microphone on the lectern, so bear with me while I use this. If you find that you can't hear me, please put your hand up and I'll bring it a bit closer up. Thank you, Dean, for the introduction. So as the slide says, I'm actually acting in the role of Assistant Auditor General at the moment. So the branch that I oversee within the office does all the information systems. Oh, right, okay. We are responsible for all the information systems, audit reports and work that is done throughout the office. So certainly in terms of the financial audit work that our office you will have contact with my branch, because we do a lot of general computer controls, IS work that supports the financial audit work. The other part of my branch is looks at performance audit across state and local government. Today I've brought Jessie Barker with me. She's one of our principal performance analysts in the performance audit side of the branch. I've also brought her along because she is the staff member that is team leading the local government procurement audit that some people here today may have had some contact with our office over. And so if there's any questions specific to the local government procurement audit, I thought Jessie would probably be best placed to assist answering those. All right, I've got a few things to juggle here, sorry. So what I'm hoping to do this morning is give you a very brief overview of the role of the Office of the Auditor General. I'm also going to take you through a high-level overview of a couple of narrow scope performance focus audits that our office tabled in May and June of this year. I can't share with you the findings from our local government procurement audit, but I'm hopefully going to give you a bit of an overview of what we set out to achieve, where we're at with it, and some of the key focus areas of the program and input into that program. So in terms of the role of the Office of the Auditor General, I think this slide provides a good high-level overview. In terms of the diagram shows that the Office of the Auditor General does report directly to Parliament, and it shows you where the office sits in terms of the accountability framework for our system of government. The functions and powers of the Office of the Auditor General are prescribed in legislation in the Auditor General Act of 2006. And the purpose of that Act is to ensure that the Auditor General has the necessary powers, immunities and independence to carry out her role. It allows for independent external audit of public sector and related entities. So now with the changes to the Local Government Act, that's both state entities and local government entities. And we do that through a range of annual financial audits plus a program of performance audits. The work of the office provides information to Parliament on public sector accountability for the expenditure of public money, how well it's functioning and whether agencies and local governments are efficient and effective in the delivery of their services. The Local Government Amendment Auditing Act of 2017, which was proclaimed back on the 28th of October last year, made legislative changes to the Local Government Act of 1995, and it provides for auditing of all local government by the Office of the Auditor General. It allows the Auditor General to contract out some or all of its financial audits, and the changes to the Local Government Act allowed a staged transition for local governments in terms of their financial audits. So those local governments that did not have an audit contract in place when the amendments were proclaimed on the 28th of October were immediately transitioned into be audited by the Office of the Auditor General for financial audit. Those local governments that had an existing contract in place are being phased in as their contracts expire, or by 2021 at the latest. So come the 2021 financial year, all 140 odd local governments will be audited by the Auditor General. I think it's important to reiterate, I know we've made this, sent this message at a number of zone meetings that we've attended, that the Auditor-General did not ask to be the auditor of local government. It was a decision of Parliament. So I hope that you bear that in mind as we move forward. So our role in local government auditing, we currently are responsible for almost 200 financial audits in the state sector. With local government coming on board, that number is going to almost double. So it's a very big body of work for our office, and we're very grateful for the transition arrangements that were embedded into the Act changes, because that is allowing us time to increase our staff and become better, increase our resourcing numbers, and also acquaint ourselves a bit more with local government before 2021, when we'll be responsible for all of them. The financial audits that we deliver are intended to provide independent assurance about local government financial statements, that they're based on proper accounts, and that they present fairly the operating results and cash flows for the period under review, which I'm sure everybody in this room is already familiar with. For the 2017-18 financial year, we have responsibility for 46 local government audits. We're only doing 3 of those in-house, being South Perth, Cambridge and Brookton. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience is. Hello. So they're the 3 that we're doing in-house. The other 43 we have contracted out to our approved auditors. I would like you all, if anyone's here from the other 43 local governments, I'd like to assure you that all those contracted out audits are being done under the supervision of our office and the Auditor-General herself. In the next financial year, so the one we're in now, 2018-19, we're going to take on about another 60 local governments. So hello to anybody that's one of those 60, and then the following year we will have all 140 plus. The way that we plan to report our financial audit work to Parliament is very similar to what we do now, in that we publish an annual results report every year which summarises the results for state entities. We are going to do the same thing for local government. We expect that it will be a separate report to what we table for state entities. We expect that we will table that report probably around February, given that local governments don't have to provide their annual reports to council until the end of December. We will probably need another couple of months after that before we table our compilation report in Parliament. The compilation report will include the details of all the audits completed, any significant accounting, control and information technology issues which we identify during those audits, plus a range of financial ratios and other statistics. And if you are keen to get some initial indication of what that report will look like, I do encourage you to go onto our website and have a look at one of our audit results reports, which for state entities, because I expect the local government one will look very similar. The other piece of work that we do, and that my branch is partly responsible for, is performance audits. So the changes to the Act not only gave us powers to do financial audits but also performance audits. We do 3 different types of these, so broad scope, narrow scope and focus audits. They all are essentially the same. The only difference is in size generally, and the focus audits are more intended to look at key financial controls. So just look in a little bit more detail at the things that we don't get to do during our annual financial audit, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples of those shortly. I would also like to say that we are very conscious that there is a lot of diversity across the local government sector. Our intention is not to compare local governments to each other at this point in time. For those of you that are familiar with our performance audits in the state sector, we do that from time to time. We do capability maturity models and we benchmark state agencies against each other. We are not intending to do that in the local government space in the next couple of years, but it is something that we will do. once we all become familiar with each other and we know more about local government. So, but at this point in time, we will not be doing any comparison of local governments. The two focus area audits that I would like to briefly run through. So the first one was the focus audit that looked at controls over corporate credit cards. That was tabled in Parliament in May of 2018. It's an audit that we do every few years across state government. It's likely that it will be an audit that we will do across local government every few years as well. I would expect that we will review different local government entities each time we do a controls over corporate credit cards audit. But it is something that I think each local government will have some involvement with over the next 3 to 4, probably 6 years. We would hope that we would have covered every local government. We looked at 8 local governments in this audit, and our objective was to determine if the LGs had effective controls over the use of the corporate credit cards. We've listed the 8 local governments in the audit report, so if you haven't already read it, I would encourage you to go and look at the report. Look at the list of local governments that we included in the audit, and also the findings and recommendations. We're trying to pitch our performance audit recommendations at all local governments, because we believe there are lessons for everybody. So whilst you may not have been involved in the audit itself, it is still may still be some useful information in the report for you to take back to your local governments. The results of the audit were actually pretty good. We did note some areas that we felt local governments could do better at, but generally we were quite happy with the findings. We found that most local governments had satisfactory controls in place, but that local governments still needed to improve some aspects of their policies and practices. I think most importantly, we didn't find any instances of credit cards being used inappropriately, but we did find instances of cards being shared rather than them being restricted to the designated card holder. The specific findings, in some cases in the report we have attributed findings to local governments, in other cases we haven't. There were 3 local governments that we found were sharing their credit cards. I won't name them. And there were 2, there were 2 that whilst they were sharing their credit cards, they were able to demonstrate that they had controls in place for approving the individual transactions of the people that were incurring them. We also found that 4 local government CEOs were either self-approving or had subordinates approving their transactions, and we have some findings and recommendations in the report around that. We also found that local governments interpreted Regulation 13 a little bit differently, which resulted in inconsistent reporting to council. So of the 8 local governments that we reviewed, we found that half of them actually reported the payment of the outstanding credit card balance to council. The other 4 reported the individual transactions that were made on the credit card. So whilst the latter approach does provide a lot of transparency to council around the purchases incurred, we in the report have not suggested that that level of transparency is necessarily needed, and that is something that each local government will need to assess moving forward. But what we noted is that there isn't a consistent level of reporting to local government and that to council, and that local governments are actually interpreting Regulation 13 differently. We found that one of the 8 local governments, around 20% of the transactions that we looked at did not have any or adequate support for the incurring of the expense, and another 2 local governments had a smaller amount or a smaller percentage of transactions that didn't have adequate support. So our actual recommendations align with some of those findings in terms of ensuring that policies specify the requirements for processes for the use of credit cards, that local governments keep adequate records of all the credit card transactions, including information that describes the nature and purpose of the expenditure, and that there has been some level of review and approval for those transactions. That redundant cards be cancelled in a timely manner to avoid misuse or loss. There's some examples in the report where we illustrate that there was between 4 and 11 months delay in cancelling a credit card that was no longer required. Other recommendations around regularly monitoring outstanding transactions to identify follow-up of unacquitted transactions, and that there be some level of management review of the use of credit cards periodically, and that review be documented and retained. The second focus area audit, which I'll talk about, was looking at timely payment of suppliers. This particular report tabled in June of this year, and the objective of this audit was to determine if local governments were making payments to suppliers on a timely basis and in accordance with better practice. So what we noted was that the local government regulations does not specify a payment time frame for the payment of suppliers, and during the audit we didn't identify a particular payment period as being better than another. What we did was look at what policies and practices were in place at the 10 local governments that we reviewed, and that the payments were being made in accordance with those policies and practices. The reason we did the audit is because timely payment of suppliers is important to the continued viability of businesses in WA, particularly small businesses that might have restricted cash flows. The actual local governments we went to, again, are outlined in the audit report, so I would encourage you to have a look at it, and also the findings and recommendations in the report. What we found was that most of the 10 local governments, so 7 out of the 10 local governments, did not have a formal policy for ensuring the timely payment of suppliers, which did lead to some consistencies in payment timeframes, but 3 of the local governments we went to did have a policy. The report lists a number of reasons that we considered were valid for non-timely payment of suppliers, and they are included on page 8 of the report. The report also listed some of the reasons that we considered were not valid reasons and were avoidable, and I'm just going to give you some examples of those. So the report says the main reasons for the delay that we considered were avoidable were misplaced or lost invoices, and a delay in processing of the payments through your finance areas. There were lots of instances where local governments were simply not able to provide an explanation for why there was a delay in paying the supplier. And some larger local governments experienced internal delays in submitting the invoices to the finance area for payment. So they're quite simple things to fix. And I would encourage everyone in the room to go back to their local governments and assess their own policies and practices for payment of suppliers against the findings and recommendations in this report. For 3 of the local governments that we visited, 15% of the payments were outside of the timeframes that they had specified in their policy for payment. And overall, across the 10 local governments, 13% of the payments were later than what the supplier required, or the local government policy required, or there was no reason for the delay. Yeah. The actual recommendations, they focus on having adequate policies and procedures that clearly require payment of invoices within specified time periods, and whether that be after the receipt of the invoice or after the receipt of the good or service, whichever occurs later. Ensuring that local governments improve administrative processes so that all payments are made in accordance with their own policies and procedures, and improving record keeping. So the last performance audit that I just want to give you a very brief rundown on is our local government procurement audit. We had hoped to table this report by now. We are expecting to release the report for procedural fairness this afternoon, and we would expect to table it in Parliament in the first week of October, all things going to plan. The actual audit itself was what we wanted to be able to look. What we looked at was whether local governments have effective procurement arrangements in place. We had we had 2 lines of inquiry which we looked at, and they were predominantly focused on policies and procedures and controls over procuring goods and services. We reviewed compliance with legislation, local government's own procurement policies, and what we considered is sound practice in this area. We looked at 8 local governments, which included both metropolitan, regional, big and small. And I think there are some people in the room today that may have been in, well, I know Dean. I know Dean was involved in the audit, so there may be other people in the room that have been involved in the audit as well. The report will be available on our website once it tables, so I would again encourage you, end of the first week in October, to check our website and to review the report. In terms of the areas that we actually looked at, this diagram gives a bit of an overview of the procurement framework that we've aligned our audit to. You'll see that the blue areas identify the two things that we focused on, so policy and training and sourcing. Within the policy and training area, we looked at compliance with regulations around policy, we looked at the specific local government policies, and we looked at what and how often training was delivered to staff. Within sourcing, we looked at the seeking of quotes and the tendering processes, conflicts of interest, segregation of duties, purchase orders and approvals, and review and payment of invoices. The report itself, as it's currently drafted, does include an appendix which goes into more detail about our expectations in these areas. So whether or not you were included in the audit, I would encourage you to look at that appendix and to review it against your own policies and practices. We didn't expect to find identical practices at all the local governments that were included in our audit. We recognise that there are a number of different variables that come into play there. But what we did expect to find was that the principles of the Local Government Act were being met, and those principles are to do with the obligations that are placed on council to oversee the allocation of local government finances and resources, and for determining that the local government policies, as well as the local government itself, keeps proper accounts and records. And in addition to that, local governments are required to establish efficient systems and procedures for financial management, which in our view includes procurement. So in terms of sound practices, that was sort of the context within which we undertook this audit. It's an audit that we have done many, well, not this particular audit, but we've done lots of procurement audits within state government in the past, and will continue to do so. This slide gives a very brief overview of the main things that have come out of those procurement audits. I'm not suggesting that these are the findings for the local government procurement audit, but I did want to just run you through these dot points very quickly. So in terms of land and expand, our state audits plus this local government audit looked at whether tenders are being awarded for a specified purpose and amount, and then expanded in both scale and price, which results in reduced transparency. We wanted to see whether contracts and tenders are being awarded with proper delegation and authority or not, that duties are appropriately segregated to reduce the risk of inappropriate purchasing or misconduct, and that local governments are recognising the risk that potential conflicts of interest pose in this space and are taking appropriate measures to reduce those risks. So the audit report does touch on those areas, but I can't say whether the findings were positive or not at the moment. because I would breach parliamentary privilege to do so, but hopefully within the next few weeks you will be able to review the report yourself. In terms of our audit program going forward, financial audit work to one side because that is a given. In terms of the performance audit work that the office does, the best place to go to find out what we're doing currently and what we're planning to do in the next 12 months is our website. We have our audit program on that website. We keep it up to date. It lists the audits that it has the local government audit on there. It lists the objective and lines of inquiry for that audit. It also provides an expected tabling date. For those audits that we are planning to start very soon, we also have them up as well. And there are 2 performance audits which my branch is starting, and I would like to just share them with you. They are both listed on the website. One of them is looking at building approvals within local government. So what we're looking at is whether local governments effectively plan and regulate their building control services. There are some lines of inquiry up on the website which are worth looking at. We're also due to start a records management audit within local government, and that's looking at whether local governments are effectively managing records in accordance with requirements. For local governments that are going to be included within those 2 performance audits, you will be getting notified of that by a letter very soon, in the next couple of weeks, I would expect. We will be notifying the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries very soon, as well as the Minister, that we are starting these audits. There are 2 focus area audits that are starting as well, which I can't advise you of the nature of those audits, but again, they will go up on our website very soon. As I mentioned earlier on, those focus audits are looking at key financial controls. And there is also you might remember from an earlier slide that I mentioned there are 3 different types of performance audits that our office does. There's also a broad scope performance audit that will be starting probably within the next 2 months, if not earlier, which is not currently on the website because we're still scoping it, but it will go up. So I suppose for those local governments that have not been involved in a focus or performance audit yet, I would think that that's coming. For some local governments, like if we covered 18 local governments in the 2 focus audits, we covered 8 in the procurement audit, so let's say 30. That's within our first year of having the mandate. So extrapolate that, I would expect that most local governments will have some form of performance audit done in their local government within the next few years. The current Auditor General's intention in terms of frequency of audit within local government is that she would very much like to have a presence in every local government every 3 years, at least once in every 3 years in the performance audit space. Some local governments may see us more frequently than others. It's just going to depend on the audit that's being done and what activity your local government has in that space. Other local governments may see us a little bit less frequently, but Caroline Spencer's intention is at least once every 3 years. We're very mindful of not over-auditing local government, but we're also very mindful of our mandate in the performance audit space. So part of our early engagement with local governments on all our performance audits is to discuss concerns that the local government may have about us being there at that point in time. So if you are involved in a performance audit and you have significant concerns about your ability to engage or the timing of the audit, then I would strongly encourage you to talk to the OAG staff that are assigned to the audit. I'm not saying that we'll be able to exclude you from the audit, but it is certainly worth having that conversation with them. And that is the end of the presentation, but I'm very happy to take any questions. And if they're going to be financial audit questions, then I'll try and answer them. But if not, suggest you'll take some notes and we'll certainly come back to you with an answer.
Thanks for your presentation. With the advent of social media and the direct coalface that a local government has, if you like, in the context with community, do you guys, one, monitor the social media communication that's happening after your report is released on the impact of a community?
Yep.
And two, is that a consideration with the construction and the wording of your audits, particularly in the context of something like credit cards, where it said you found no instances of inappropriate use, yet potentially that gets lost in the flurry of social media and the detrimental impact that potentially has on the local government reputation?
Yeah, look, we have a yes is a simple answer, but you need to be mindful of the fact that the intention of our report is to report to Parliament, and we have no control over social media. We've had many instances in the past in the state sector where we have tabled a report, issued our media statement, and the media has paraphrased it to present a different image. We have no control over that. And similarly with social media as well, we have no control over it, but we are aware of the fact that does happen. The other comment I make is that our office our approach to writing our reports is a plain English approach. So we try to use as little technical jargon as possible, and the risk with that is that people can misinterpret the message. It may not come across as factually accurate as what if we had more technical information in there, then there might potentially be less opportunity to misconstrue the message. But yeah, look, we have a communications section. They are always monitoring the media, whether it be print media or social media, and we take that on board as we develop up our future audit topics. And just as the comment that you made, we also monitor print and social media for potential audit topics, things that are of concern to members of the public. So we use it for a variety of reasons. Any other questions?
Hello, it's Anne from Vic Park.
Hello.
With performance audits, how much notice do you give a local government for budget purposes? How do we budget for it? And just to know how much notice we are given.
Well, in terms of budgeting, we don't pass on the cost of our performance audits to local government. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
No.
So the only cost that will be incurred by local government is the cost for financial audits. So all of our performance audit work comes through a Treasury appropriation, so it's not passed on to local government.
Okay,
and what we do as part of our budget bid every year is we let Treasury know how many performance audits that we intend to do, both in the state and local government space. And we get approval to do that, which then feeds into our KPIs and deliverables. In terms of how much notice we give you, though, that an audit is starting, not a lot, really, which is why I think it's important to keep an eye on our website just to see what audits are on our radar. We generally would send a formal letter a few weeks before we would hope to have a meeting to start the audit. But again, what I said earlier about talking to the staff that are engaged to do the audit about the impact of the audit on your business is really important, because particularly audits where we're reviewing a lot of local governments, there might be opportunity to not do the work at your local government when we plan to do it, but to delay it and do it a little bit later or to bring it forward. So yeah.
Good morning. My name is Lee. I'm from Eastern Metropolitan Regional Council. We are one of the lucky 46. Got audited by our OAG, delegated to Macquarie Partners. we generally finalise everything, the audit done and dusted by the end of August, and have everything tabled to the audit committee by first week in September and then to council at the end of September. However, there has been considerable delay this year. I'm just wondering in general, how much time can we expect the OAG to take to come back to us with everything? Because this year we had to cancel the audit meeting earlier in the week, and it's now going to October's committee meeting.
Yeah.
But if the same thing happens next year and we have an election, it's going to delay it even further.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering.
So the audit firm, was that the audit firm that had been doing your financial audits previously?
Yes.
Okay, and have you been in contact with the OAG engagement leader about the reasons for the delay?
I believe my director, or our director, has been, and there's just been a few questions. Like I said, the actual audit actually was completed on the 10th of August, and apparently we're hoping that we'll hear back from OAG today, see if everything's okay or not. So that's like a month later. Or
Yeah,
more.
so
Yeah.
whilst we contracted a firm to do the audit for us, we still have to review all the work papers
Yeah,
and
I
everything,
understand
so
that.
which is why I was asking if you'd been in contact with the engagement leader. So I can't comment on your particular audit, but it could potentially be because our review processes that we've undertaken, which generally wouldn't be part of the process. Prior to us becoming the local government auditors, there wasn't any independent review process of the actual the quality of the audit itself. So we are now doing a quality review of the contracted auditor's work. Whether or not that's the reason for the delay at your local government, I can't comment on. So I would encourage you to call the engagement leader from the OAG that's overseeing it and have a conversation with them about it. I believe that every local government, all 46 local governments were sent a letter by the Auditor General advising who the specific engagement leader from our office was. So there will be a name and contact details on that initial letter. If you want, we can come back to you and get that person to call you if you're not aware of who it is.
They're going to let us know.
Okay.
I know who it is.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been in contact.
Yeah, so I can't comment on the reasons for the delay and whether it might happen again next year.
But usually what, we talk about 2 weeks turnaround time, 3 weeks, a month? No.
I can't comment because it's going to depend on the quality of the audit pack, really. Like if the audit pack's great, then it won't take an awful long time to review it. But if it's not, then we have to go back and get additional information. So I don't know why there was a delay and whether 1 month is representative of what it's going to take in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Aubrey here from the City of Swan. With reference to the credit card audit that you were talking about, and you may address this in the report or may not, you were saying that the report talked about or found that credit card payments were equally split in terms of the reporting, that 4 local governments reported on detail of every transaction and 4 only basically said this is the payment that we made back to the bank for those specific credit card expenditures, i.e. bulk reporting. There's specific operational guidance from the department that actually asks that detailed reporting are done, but it's obviously operational guidance. So my question is how much weight do you put on that operational guidance?
Significant, I would say. I would also expect that I didn't undertake this audit, so I'm speaking off the cuff here, but we would also expect that operational guidance to be embedded within the policies and procedures. So what we essentially did as part of the audit, I believe, is review compliance with your own policies and procedures. And for those local governments that didn't have a policy and procedure, then we reviewed against what possibly that operational guidance, I'm not sure, but what we would have considered to be sound, good, better practice. So the comment in the report around inconsistency is that what we noted is that local governments are interpreting the requirement of the regulation differently, and so there is no standard reporting against across the 8 local governments in that audit, so everyone's doing it a little bit differently. What is the correct way to report to council? I can't comment on. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't read the operational guidance. So, for those local governments that embedded that operational guidance into their policies, then the audit would have reviewed against that. Yeah.
Thanks, Viola. I just wanted to see you walk all the way across the room. Dean from Harvey. Aloha, wonderful presentation. I think you said that all councils can expect the credit card performance audit. Is that going to be the case? If that's true, is that going to be the case for the other performance audits as well, as you see over time that they would all receive those? And also a question in relation to if the OAG is performing the audit at a council themselves, is the council made aware of what the financial costs are and the time constraints ahead of time for budgeting purposes for staffing and also for dollars? Yeah,
so I'll answer the first question first because I'm more equipped to do that. The answer is I don't know. So what we've done in state government is we have, procurement, every state government procures, every local government procures. So I think it's reasonable to expect that there will be additional future procurement audits. When and the scope of them is yet to be determined. That's part of the reason for us developing a forward program and putting it on our website so that there is some visibility. Credit cards, yeah, we think that that's probably an audit that we'll have to keep doing within local government. At what point in time we scale that back, again, it will depend on the findings from each audit. Timely payment of suppliers, they're just sort of good governance type audits that we would expect to see that local governments are improving their policies and processes where necessary. Not all local governments need to improve over time. And when the Auditor-General gets to a position of having a reasonable level of comfort in that space, she'll probably scale back some of those audits. So there'll be, we sort of call them hygiene audits. There'll just be a range of hygiene audits that are cycled through local government as we do in state government over the years to come. And then there'll be these other ones that we pop in there that are one-offs. We've done plenty of one-off procurement, one-off performance audits within state government. We don't go back in. Sometimes we'll do a follow-up audit a number of years later if the office believes that it's a good use of taxpayer dollars to do that. But generally we have a range of hygiene audits that will be done on a cycle and others that just get popped in from time to time. In terms of the cost of financial audits, I was not directly involved in the costing process that was done for the 17-18 audit cycle. I do know that a lot of work was put in to try and determine what the financial audit costs were going to be for each local government. We will go through, I think the process has already started for the 18-19 year to determine what our costs that will then be imposed on local government might be. At what point in time we'll be in a position to release that to you, I would encourage you to make contact with our Assistant Auditor General that heads up our financial audit area, or even the Auditor General herself if you're wanting visibility of what your audit costs might be. My understanding is for 17-18, every local government was sent a letter with the expected cost of the audit. That may have come late in the piece for 17-18 because we didn't get proclamation until the 28th of October. Hopefully for this financial year, though, you'll get notification a little bit earlier, but I can't tell you. I know that work is underway. Some local governments may find that their fees come down, others might find that it goes up. But yeah, there's avenues to get those questions answered more clearly than what I've been able to.
Thank you.
That's all right. Are there any other questions?
Hi, Kelly from City of Gosnells. I just want to know, with the performance audits, generally what's the time frame that you visit the council for?
Yeah. So the focus area audits are usually done around this time of the year. And they are generally quite small in scope, so you would probably expect, I would probably expect an auditor to be doing the audit for probably a 3 to 4 month period. A lot of that will not be in at your local government, but that's quite a small time period. The narrow scope performance audits, the minimum amount of time is 6 months. Most of them stretch to 9 to 12 months in duration. If I use procurement as the example, there were 8 local governments in that audit, but the amount of time we actually spent at each local government on site was a week or less. There's been a lot of back and forth with emails and telephone calls and submission of documents and evidence, etc. But the actual time that we've spent in at the local governments has been incredibly small or short. But the actual time over, the elapsed time that the audit has taken is because we've covered off 8 local governments. And because of our management letter processes, etc., it takes quite a long time to go through the quality processes that we have embedded into our methodology. So I would expect 9 to 12 months you could expect from the time the audit starts to when we would table something in Parliament. The broad scope audits are potentially longer still. In state government, the minimum would be 12 months for a broad scope audit. In local government, I would probably say minimum of 12 months as well, but it's going to depend on how many local governments are included in those audits and what the scope is. So they vary quite substantially. We try to, part of the engagement team's responsibilities are to try and keep everybody up to date on where we're at in the process and when we expect to table. Our tabling sometimes gets delayed for reasons unrelated to the audit. It might be because we don't want to table multiple audits on the same parliamentary sitting date, or particular ministerial requests to delay tabling to times when both houses are sitting as opposed to just the council or the assembly. So that there's lots of reasons why the reports can get extended out that are sort of unrelated to the audit itself. For those local governments that have been involved in the procurement audit, you will know that we've had a number of staff changes on the audit. Jessie's been the one constant, thank goodness. But we've had engagement leaders that have left, gone on secondment, etc. So they're things that have been outside of our control, and because of the quality processes, it means that we then have to duplicate things within our office to provide the assurance to the Auditor-General that she needs. So, but yeah, part of the engagement team's responsibilities are to let everybody know what's happening, whilst we might not be able to give you an exact date of when the report will table and the audit will finish. Yeah. But what I said earlier was that the performance audit costs are not imposed on local government. So whilst I understand it's something hanging over your head for a long period of time, it doesn't add to cost for local government. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much for having us here today. I know that when the local government procurement audit tables, we will be attending various forums and meetings to give a very detailed rundown on the actual audit and the findings from the audit. That may be me or it may be somebody else. So I would expect that, opportunities like this, you'll probably see somebody from the office again. So thanks for your time.